Hi, I'm Ronnie from Ronnie's Garage. We're having our monthly tech meet, and today we're going to be talking about the Silver Shadow series, the differences between the Silver Cloud and Silver Shadow, and a lot of the features, hydraulics, and all that kind of stuff.
So are the hygroscopic fluid systems convertible to the mineral oil system?
No, that's a great idea, but the rubbers are incompatible, so nobody has designed the seals for these systems in that type of rubber. These old brake fluid cars, the rubber they use is EPDM, and I don't know what that stands for, but it's a style of rubber. Anything with a mineral oil, which is engine oil, transmission fluid, gear fluid, the brake mineral oil, uses a Buna rubber, and that's butyl something, whatever. So no. And the problem with the hygroscopic type cars, the brake fluid cars, the Silver Shadow series, is that water getting into the system and assimilating, it causes corrosion on all the system parts. So typically on the mineral oil cars, the biggest problem is leaks because the seals fail. You take them apart, they're pristine, you just put new seals in, put them back in. Problem with the brake fluid cars is when you take them apart, they usually seize from corrosion. You take them apart and everything's all rusty and you have to replace parts. But that's just what it is, right?
What's the most common way that the water gets into the system?
It comes in right through these little holes up here, the vents. You have to have a vent because that stuff gets hot. Remember, this brake fluid system, it's running through pumps bolted to the engine. So it gets pretty warm.
There's humidity in the air.
Yeah, it just pulls it out of the air. So that's just part of the changes when they went to the Silver Shadow. They went to the suspension change. I mentioned those rear trailing arms. It's four-wheel independent suspension. It makes it ride a lot better, handle a lot better. The early cars, they had less sway bars. They had a upper and lower A-arm in the front, and they like to roll in the corners. Right? Big heavy car, they were roll. A lot of suspension kits came out with beefier sway bars, stiffer springs to make them feel more modern. We can go over there now and we can look at the front suspension. This is a Shadow 2. This is the last of the Shadow series. I mentioned that the suspension was a little different on the Shadow 2. It came out in, what was it, 73. They came out with this upper A. It's like a, what do they call that? A compliance arm. It looks kind of diminutive, I think, for a big car, because the earlier cars, you see these two big arms coming down, they swing up and down. It had a pair up top too, a little smaller, but it's a double wishbone is what they call that. And that just didn't react as well, I guess. So they went to a much different, it's called a compliance rod. So it's got what it has. If you look here, it's got the upper ball joint. It's got an arm going up to just a single pivot. And then it has another rod going back here to stabilize it, to keep your caster correct. I like these because they need work all the time. It's a weak design, to be honest with you, because you've got two bushings taken all the way to that and the force. There's a lot of force on these cars when you are cornering. Granted, most of the weight of the car is on this lower ball joint and this pretty stout A-arm system, but the upper part, hitting the brakes, every time you hit the brakes, it's going forward and back. It's a high maintenance item also. You notice this car right here has a rack and pinion on it. Okay, rack and pinion is, that's the state of the art. When they came out with that, it really changed cars because you went from 3 to 4 turns lock to lock to maybe 2. So it's much more responsive. I prefer the older steering on this model only because I like to feel like an old man and just do this kind of thing, right? So on the suspension, you can see the shocks right there. That's a big gas shock, giant springs. When those springs are out on the ground, they're about this tall. These actually ride pretty good, I think, for a 3-ton car. They brake very well when everything is right for
They
a
handle
three-ton
well,
car,
too.
and they handle well.
You'll probably know this because you just got one. My Camargue feels to me like it handles better than a Shadow, but the shop manual does not indicate anything I've been able to find different about a Camargue mechanically.
I think it's
Is it
because
my
it's
imagination, or?
a two-door hardtop. I think is why you're going to have a little bit less flex. Which brings us to another good point. Let's go over to this Silver Cloud. Let's take a look at the frame on this thing. This is big, boxed. It's got a cross member in here, and it goes from the front to the back of the car. Okay, so the body is bolted to this frame. The body has little rubber mounts, but this is an inflexible, solid car, and that's the biggest, probably the biggest difference when you go from a framed car like this to what do they call it, unibody car. Because let's come over here now, and we'll see that this does not have a big frame under it. What it has up front is a rectangular subframe. So this big piece right here, everybody wants to look at the suspension is bolted to, the engine is bolted to, everything is bolted to. This big piece coming all the way around has these big mounts here. And they mount to the body. So that's an independent thing that moves around. Not a whole lot, but the body is one piece. And in the back, what they did is they have another subframe, which is this piece right here. And if you follow it out, you'll see that it has mounts out on the outside. This big piece is a subframe, and that's what the trailing arm suspension is mounted to, all the hydraulics. And it's got these big radius rods here to stabilize it, because it's just a single up back here. So if you think about it, it's going to be wanting to do this. Taking these out and putting them back in is really a pain. If you want to see one of these, there's a couple of used ones out there that I'm taking apart. There's a few front subframes and a couple of rear subframes. And I want you to pay close attention. I encourage all of you to go look at it. It's got the height control valves on it, and there's a lot of pipes on top of that frame. A lot of pipes on this car.
Do you jack it up here, or do you pick on the suspension?
It depends. When we lift them, we lift them right here. There's on the unibody, there's a structure here, and there's a little pad there. In the back, there's usually a triangular plate, which he missed, but this is where I usually lift them. When you jack them, like on the side of the road,
Yeah, well, like in your shop.
in your shop, you can jack a wheel under here,
Right.
but the jacking point is a single jacking point for the car jack. There's a little door here, and there's a ratchet jack that lifts the whole side of the car.
With a floor jack, is it safe to lift the whole nose from here?
In fact, yes, this is the spot right here. We put a floor jack. When we want to move a car around here, this is where we jack. If you want to jack the front of the car. So if you lift the wheels off and you take a floor jack, if you lift them off the ground and you floor jack, you can actually turn it and move it around.
So if you floor jack it up here and you want the front end up, you can just put jack stands underneath here.
Where these pads are.
Oh, back there, not over here.
You can, if you just want. I always like to,
Yeah.
I'm so used to a rack. Or you can put jack stands right here. That's the bolt that bolts it to the body,
Okay.
the subframe.
And can you jack it up in the back off the way around?
No. The jacking point in the back, if you want to, let's look at this car, because our differential, you can jack it up by the differential. That's where we do. This is a later car, mineral oil car, so you can just put your floor jack. I usually use a block of wood because this is aluminum, and you can jack the whole back end up that way.
And then place the jack stand, same place in the back on the trailer.
Yeah, on this car, yes. You can just go out on the edge here, right in here. You can see there's
Yeah,
a
I see.
spot. They have these tie-down plates that most of them are smashed because people lift them by it. You can
Yeah.
see this. This used to be down. Let's see, is that one intact? No, well, that one's partially intact.
Oh yeah.
But you can see this has a similar rear subframe. That differential is suspended. Let me go grab the parts. They're outside. I'll be right back.